The question comes up quite often, what materials should I have on hand in my shop? And that's usually a question from somebody that's just getting started and they want to know what the basic stock of materials would be to make a variety of projects. That's a difficult question to answer because everybody's making different projects. This is my rack of steel for the more common stuff. I have other things. You can probably see these buckets full of assorted junk over here, and they hold all sorts of scrappy bits that look like they might be useful, and mostly they sit out here and rust because they're really not as useful as they look like they should be. But you can tell that I keep a huge variety of stuff on hand for a small shop. For a big shop, they'd keep a lot more than this on hand. And today I'm going to go to the steel yard and I'm going to buy more because I'm running out of certain things. The things I need for the next project on the list don't exist on this rack. I ran out of them. I've got to go buy more stuff. So I have to go shopping for materials today. But what I keep on here, the top rack is 1/8 inch material, and that's anything from 1/8 by half up to 1/8 by 3 or 1/8 by 4. There might be a piece of 1/8 by 6 up there just because I needed it once. I don't use 1/8 inch round, other than maybe some welding rod for little pins and little rivets. But I don't stock 1/8 inch round. I've never seen 1/8 inch square, although I'm sure they make it. Then I get down to 1/4 inch, and I do stock 1/4 inch round and 1/4 inch square. And if you're just starting out and you're making things like hooks and little hangers and fairly simple small projects, 1/4 inch material is a good place to start with. 1/4 round, 1/4 square, 1/4 by half, 1/4 by 3/4 might be some of your most useful materials. But I keep, again, this is a piece of 1/4 by 6 up here, and I use 1/4 by 3/4, 1/4 by 1, 1 1/4, and 1 1/2 all the time. Occasionally I use 1/4 by 2. But the 1/4 by 1 1/2, 1/4 by 1, stuff like that I go through quite a bit. That's some of what I need to go get because I don't have any more 1/4 by 3/4 or 1/4 by 1 on here. I have some oddballs here, 5/16 and 3/16 stuff. I rarely use that. That's why it's fairly empty. I'm going to pick up some 5/16 flat bar today, but I don't use much of that. 3/8 round, square, various widths of flat. Same for 1/2 inch, 5/8, 3/4. 1 inch is 1 inch square to 1 inch by 2 inch, and I use that sometimes for making axes and adzes and other tools that will have tool steel forge welded to them. I also keep similar sizes, like 1 by 1 1/2, in something like 01 or 4140 for making tools that I'm not going to forge weld. But if you're just starting out, that's big material. You're not going to want to forge that stuff. And on the bottom, I've got all sorts of other oddball stuff. And then I got Smitty the helper cat. He just thinks he should be part of the show. But you can see these buckets are just full of who knows what. I've got a bucket with railroad spikes I hardly ever use, and I've got some old muzzle loading rifle barrel that didn't meet standards at the factory, so this is something I can use to make rifle barrel tomahawks and things like that. It's not suitable for making a rifle barrel or using as a rifle barrel. The bore is off, or there's something wrong with it, so I would never use it for that. I've got just junk, stuff I pick up at scrap yards, stuff that's left over, some bits of rebar, and this stuff always looks useful, but it rarely gets used. In this bin I keep things that I know to be hardenable steels. I have new steels, things like W1, 5160, S7, 4140, and I have lots of salvage steel like this piece of hollow core drill rod, some big axle shafts, coil springs, some cable that would make nice cable Damascus blades, some conveyor belt chain used in the sugar beet farming that is something similar to a 1085 or 1095, big garage door springs that are about a 1095. And this is all useful stuff, but again, it collects almost faster than you ever use it. Well, I try to keep a filing system in that other bin where things should be. A lot of the tool steel I'm working with ends up out here. And I try to write on it what it is, 5160, 4140, 01, W1, so I know what it is. And this is the stuff I'm actually using in the shop on a more regular basis. If I quit using it, it'll end up out there where it kind of gets forgotten about. Now, it used to be that you could go to a steel supplier and they would cut a piece in half so you could load it in the truck. Most of this stuff comes in 20-foot pieces, all the mild steel. The tool steel doesn't. But these days they charge you. And it's at least $2 a cut at the supplier I go to. And when I'm buying 50 or 100 bars at a time, that gets to be a lot of money. So I have this great big demolition saw that runs an abrasive steel cutting blade, and in about 15 minutes I can cut it all in half, load it in the truck, and I don't have to pay them to cut it. Certainly on small scale purchases, this is way overkill. I own this saw for another reason. I bought it for some construction work. I didn't buy it for this. But using it this way, I have probably paid for it several times over in what I have saved by paying them to cut the stuff for me. Way easier for them to cut it. But this does the job. It does it very nicely. And then I have this nice big saw for other projects around here, and it does get used around the shop and around the house. One of these battery operated angle grinders with a cutoff disc will do a very good job if you're buying smaller materials and not much of it. If you're buying a couple of pieces, a 1/4 inch or 3/8 square bar, this is more than you need. Do take extra batteries with you and extra wheels just in case, because it's the pits to get halfway through your cutting and still have a couple of 20-foot bars and you can't cut them because your battery's dead and you're out of discs, and now you got to tell them, I'll be back later to pick up that other bar. That's sort of a drag. So take extra batteries and stuff with you. When I take this big saw, I make sure it's got a good sized blade on it. I take extra gas for it. I take my hearing protectors and my tape measure and my soapstone and a pair of gloves so that I'm well protected while I cut the stuff. So let's head over to Midwest Fabrication and Steel in Pueblo, which is where I buy my stuff, and let's pick up a truckload of materials that should last for another 3 or 4 months. Well, we're in Pueblo at Midwest Fabrication and Steel. This is where I buy most of my mild steel bar stock. I don't have, or they don't have, tool steel available here. So our first stop will be in the office, which is this little red brick building right here, and I gotta go get a ticket. Okay, we got our ticket, 3 pages long, full of goodies. Time to go to the warehouse. So this is the warehouse, and this is where we come to pick everything up. Great big monster of a building. Well, that's all cut and loaded and ready for the trip home. Well, that's a little look at what I go through to make sure I've got materials to work with here at Black Bear Forge. I realize most people don't need to buy this quantity of materials at any given time or want to stock this much material. But for me, since it's a half-hour trip to town and a half-hour trip back, and it ends up being about 3 hours total by the time I deal with the office, cut the materials up, load it, get it home, it's worth buying in larger quantities. I still have to put this on the rack, so I got another hour, hour and a half involved, and then I got to start cutting some of this up for material, for projects, and that stuff won't go on the rack. I'll just drag it straight in the shop. This is about $1,200 worth of steel that I buy at a time, and I do this 3 or 4 times a year so that I have materials to make customers' projects with. If you're not looking to buy that kind of quantity of materials, most steel yards will sell a lot less. They usually have a minimum of $25 to $50, and that would be the equivalent of maybe 2, 3, 4 half-inch square bars 20 feet long. So for a hobbyist, it can be quite a bit of steel to make their minimum. Another option, most steel yards cut things to order, and well, they charge more if you want to just buy 10 feet, and they'll cut a piece off and they'll sell you 10 feet of it. What you want is the remnant, because somebody else was willing to pay the higher price to have it cut. So now they have a 10-foot piece or maybe an 8-foot piece or 6-foot piece, whatever, sitting around that is harder for them to sell. And if you go in and ask about remnants, you might very well get a great deal at a discounted price and get things that are already cut and you can already get in the back of your pickup. There's a lot of options for getting steel. Not everybody has a big full-service steel warehouse in their area. In Pueblo, we've got 2 that I know of. There used to be 3. Colorado Springs probably has more. And if I wanted to drive 3 hours to Denver, there's probably a dozen or more places I can buy materials in this quantity at about this price. And sometimes if you've got that available, it pays to shop around for who provides the best service or who's going to cut it for free or who has the best deal on remnants. So it's worth checking that out. If you live in a smaller area but have welders around, they have to get their material somewhere. They're probably having it delivered on a truck from one of these big warehouses that comes through once a week or once a month. And you might either be able to buy from the welding shop, or you might be able to make friends with them and piggyback an order with them and just add to their order, pay a little extra to them so it's worth their trouble, and not have to drive 3 or 4 hours to the next big town to get your materials. As a last resort, most home centers, hardware stores, and things like that will sell small quantities of steel. Usually very limited selection, 1/8 by 3/4, 1/8 by 1, maybe 1/4 by 1, maybe 1/4 inch square, but not very much. It's just small project pieces, and it's outrageously priced. I probably pay $12 for a piece of half-inch square bar, 20 feet long, and if you could get that at the home center, it would be a 3-foot bar, and it'd probably be $10. So you get way more for your money buying it from a steel supplier, if you've got one and if you can find one. It's fun to go to scrap yards and to scrounge materials. You don't know what you're going to get. You may find something you think is mild steel, and it could be a piece of spring steel, and it could break when you try to work it, or it could just beat you to death trying to work it. A lot of people use rebar. Rebar is fairly unpredictable. Every piece of rebar is a different grade, and if you know how to read the pattern on it, you can tell what grade of steel it is, but it's not good steel for most blacksmithing work. It's just a medium carbon steel that is outstanding for rebar, and if you can find anything else, if you can afford anything else, I would try to find better material. And starting with new, mild steel that you know is mild steel is going to put you way ahead. Same thing holds for tool steels. Tool steels, it's great to find old leaf springs and coil springs and sucker rod and all that stuff, But it's all a bit of an unknown, and it's all been used, which means it may have stress in it, and it may crack where you don't want it to crack, and you may have trouble with it. It's sort of a give and take. It's a lot of fun to use that stuff. I like scrounging for this stuff. It's like finding treasure when somebody has a piece laying out that they're throwing away, and they'll say, yeah, take it. I want this thing off my property, and you get a nice coil spring or a leaf spring or sucker rod or a hollow core drill bit or whatever it is, can be a great find. But buying brand new tool steel that you know exactly what it is, you want 4140, buy 4140. Because 4140 is not technically tool steel. If you want S7 or W1 or O1 or something like that, you can buy it new, you can know what it is, you know it doesn't have a history that means it's about to fail on you, and that's money well spent if you can afford to do that. And the quantities we use are not that big, especially in tool steels. If you're just making punches and chisels, you're not looking at that big a price in tool steels. If you're making hammers to sell and you need to make 3 or 4 pound hammers, it does run into some money, but you roll that into the price of the hammers. So anyways, that's just a look at materials, buying materials, where you might find materials. What you need in your shop is entirely up to what you're making. Plan for what you're making, figure out what materials you need, and that's what you should buy. If you're just buying random material, then you're going to have to come up with random projects to try and use the materials you have on hand, and that can be fun too. So until the next time, I hope you can get out to your shop, work on something, but do stay safe, do wear your safety glasses. I'm going to get back to work, and we'll see you later.